Ba 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 ba. It's just me. Hi, I'm alone. It's just me. Just me. Only me. Just one me. I'm not late. I'm not late. You were all early. I love turtles. You were all early. I totally didn't forget to download the game. That's not what happened. And if you say that's what happened, I'm gonna call you a liar. But anyway, welcome to Witch on the Holy Night. And so I'm surprised you all that this is not a Fate stream. It's Fate adjacent. I mean, these characters show up in Fate series from what I'm aware. So anyway, the voice acting is on, I believe. Unless this game doesn't have voice acting. We'll find out together. This is the first time I'm opening this game. Let's go. It was a winter's day 8 years ago. That solemn morning was when she understood the value of life for the first time. Is the audio going fine? Can everybody hear everything good? Looks good. Looks good on my end, so... Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. Inhospitable. It's inhospitable. We're off to a great start. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories both frustrating and halcyon. That was only during summer, though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the ice over windows to clear. Her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out of the front door she would go, traversing to the garden with icy breath, until she reached the old sedan. As always, she inserted the key and then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life, just as she proudly finished this humble task she'd done so many times before. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that a feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. 3 cats had been huddling in the warmth of the engine compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belt and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its half-face covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather the chunk of meat that had been its mother, the last bit of life that it could muster. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. Welcome, Nathaniel. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. Welcome to the stream. I hope you enjoy the animal abuse. I mean, aka the animal cruelty that we have just witnessed. What a time to make it in, Nathaniel, to watch cats be murdered. Well, it wasn't intentional murder. I apologize that you had to come in at this point and see it. They had slept next to the engine and woken into a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. Ah, I remember this. I remember when I was I was a kid, there was a cat stuck in the engine of a friend's car once. It was very hard to get it out. Luckily, we didn't. Luckily, we heard it in the engine, so it didn't suffer this fate. But that was very scary, personally. I avoided seeing this scene. We saved the kitten in my timeline. It's fine.
いいんだ。が悪いんじゃないんだよ。
Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked with the blood of its mother and brother. I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest.
待ちなさい。
She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that the magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help.
その子猫の運命を変えろという。
The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. The kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Oop. Wrong button. Whether it was a simple task or a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childlike wish like a machine. The girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky.
トロだったな。結局元に戻すと。
Her mind struggled to come to grips with what just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it never happened. The only thing she knew for sure was that life once extinguished can never return.
そこに誰かいるの?
That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed, whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is a fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Woo! Dang, what an opening! Arrogant, greedy, and able to destroy. I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Chapter 1, Strange One. And anyway, welcome to typemoon stuff. If you have not been here before, don't worry. It can only get worse. It can only get worse. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy your stay. I will be your narrator on this lovely journey. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky with an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, but today classes were canceled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of the evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination, but having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what's happening outside was no concern to her. She shut the curtains, then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, her eyes popped open out of habit.
こんな日に限って。
The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, the distance seemed somewhat between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
アリス出ないの？
She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. Hello, recommended drink. Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm still slowly getting over this cold. But it's all right. We're starting out this visual novel with a bang. And it is telephone ringing. The realizing struck that her housemates did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at a prestigious little hilltop academy. Prestigious. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
ああ、もうせっかくの安眠を。
It is indeed cold season. She was left with no choice but to get up and throw on a top on and leave the room. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forests. Winter always arrived here first before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with a dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、幽霊屋敷そのものだけど、だいたい2人で住むには広すぎるのよ、この家は。
She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch up to the unrelenting ring and the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale, for whether it be objectively true or merely supposition. I know words. Let's continue. We'll pretend we know words. It is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Ooh, stuff happening? We'll find out. Look at all of these crazy things. I feel like I remember they were going to make an anime for this series, but I don't remember if that happened or not yet. Because as we all know, Typemoon has ufotable by the ball sack. As they say, you better start animating another series for us. To which then ufotable says, yes, honey. Umbrella, you can stand under my umbrella, Ella, Ella, A. So far, nothing crazy happening here. This is what inspired me. Everything normal so far. No crazy things happening at all. Are we sure this is a Typemoon game? I'm sure it'll go to 0 and 100 in no time flat, just like with the dead kittens in the carburetor. Da-da-da. Ooh. How quaint. Beautiful. Welcome to Witch on the Holy Night. We hope you enjoy your stay. So quaint. Lovely. The rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon.
と言っても、私には関係のない話だけど。
The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance of the headed inside. And headed inside. Blah, 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 blah. Words. English. Woo. Why the doc go barking here alone? Because I'm alone this weekend. It's just me. It's just you guys and me playing this lovely visual novel. She didn't encounter any of the other students along the way. Nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk to the faculty room simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all of its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed toward the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and a suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Dogs alone call pet control. You, pet control doesn't own me. I have a collar and I'm inside my own house. They can't do nothing. Slim frame glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image of this mid-20s man presented clashed with a cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet. The spiky collar is to keep coyotes from eating me. 'Cause I am a small dog. I mean, I am a ferocious large dog that cannot be trifled with anyway.
Yamashiro-sensei.
She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
やあ、おはよう、青崎くん。要件は聞いているかな？
はい。1時間前に自宅で、事前に何の相談もなく。
Having graduated from the high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was the opinion that teachers should come across more astute? I don't know. Smart and mature, I'm sure she means that word. I need to read more books. I don't know what some of these words be saying in this game. Like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure. Not a buddy to joke and pal around with. It was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Strict. Yes, uptight. Teacher-like, yeah, he's not teacher-like. Who wants to be friends with your teacher? Gross. Anyway. Not that she'd ever be wired to make friendly small talk.
はあ、今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではありませんから。
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matches the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood for having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial. Anyway, thanks to Nathaniel for coming in with a dictionary. Smart cat person right there. Anyway, we're all gonna be enjoying our last day on TikTok tomorrow, right? What to do? Chase the cat, Cherry. I don't wanna. That sounds like so much work.
So? ならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
What you mean is work? They're standing over there. LMAO, yeah, I'm gonna throw go your play party. I've been debating whether if I should stream or not for TikTok for the final day, but that seems like a lot of work. I mean, although Restream does give me the option to stream to TikTok now, and I used it a few times. It's nice, but I mean, I feel like the TikTok streaming doesn't really work unless you're actually using the TikTok Live Studio. Because I noticed like there's an extreme difference from how they push out your streams from the studio versus if you use something else, so. But who knows? Who then knows? I'm not good at analytics. I don't know. I just write funny words, and then sometimes TikTok gets mad at me because I use funny words that I shouldn't be using.
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
And Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes. He finally understood the reason behind her tone, and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
転入生の紹介をするとだけです。理由も脈絡もない説明でした。
One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to the school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか？
いや、ごめん謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。
本当に転入生の問題で？
訳ありというか難しいというか。彼宗十郎くんというんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teacher duties onto her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe she meant the student had behavioral problems or was difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
Don't you love it when teachers are like, just want you to be friends with them, it's fine. She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by mere concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up on her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
何？学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ。青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will is also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectations, and on those occasions, they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That's how Yamashiro had come to deal with her over the past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
それはね、別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip of a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
You're the only one who wouldn't say no. There we go. That's what the teacher said. It's why it has to be you. Because you wouldn't say no. In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
うわ怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。とまあ納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もうずいぶん待たせてしまっているからね。それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied before turning and walking out of the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sounds of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. Very suspiciously keeping his thumb hidden. He was the only one there. What is he hiding? He's hiding a lot of stuff. I'm sure all of these are regular, normal students and teachers. There is nothing weird happening here at all. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to the spot like a scarecrow. He was chilled to the bone. It was at the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. Hello, Brad. Welcome to the stream. I hope you enjoy this lovely narration. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on the freezing fingers. He aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they'd wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned to his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it, barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. The travel detail perked him up a little. That trivial detail. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil and reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety that the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with a calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not was he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out at this moment. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on the way to the meeting room. She was told that he lived his whole life up the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of the civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
なんて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
She had every right to be angry. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with the villages in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways in Japan the old national railways now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし、電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね、そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
She shot a sidelong glare at his way and he laughed. It seemed that the naivety of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど、そいつ学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど、
He
実
didn't
際
know
来る
what
のは今日が
school
初めて
is.
らしい。
Oh my
それ
god!
で緊張していたのかな。あまり会話も弾まなかった。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや、探検隊の話だね。
What?
怖いな、青崎くん。冗談だって。
I wouldn't say
そう、
Pharaoh is
睨ま
a
ないで
good
く
way
れ。
to describe him if he's just patiently just sitting there staring at you.
大丈夫。話してみた感じ、おとなしい子だったから。なんていうか、言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ、愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし、だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep-deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought that the person responsible for this mess would better be off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all of this on a normal school day, another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
Busy what? Sleeping? Her pounding headache from the lack of sleep boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who would disturb her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching her peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with the most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little. You don't have to do anything. For some, these words were priceless luxuries. For other, an unbearable torture. Love at first sight? We'll find out. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she too, suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at the very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had some reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でも、そろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろ
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time and he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
う。よかった。忘れられているかと思った。
What would I have done if they'd forgotten about me? I probably would have just kept sitting here, honestly. He could hear the two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。ずいぶんとお待たせしちゃって。
First person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought me here.
って、あれ？里中先生いないんですか？ひどいな。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Are we getting face reveals, finally? No, not just yet. We're probably gonna just stay slightly out of the frame. Oh, no, there they are. Never mind. Face reveal, finally. Here we go. Here's our normal protagonist being normal. Silent Hill music? What? No. None of... Nothing scary would ever happen in a typemoon game. Never. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This was how it felt when time stood still. Oh my god, it's a girl! She blinked quickly a few times as was taken back. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes widened slightly after taken back. The reason was obvious. Putting his feelings into words was a different matter altogether, so we'll never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Yay, it's Aoko! His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or for worse, like the ephemeral beauty of the fireworks. And then there was rain! Lots and lots of rain! It was commonly believed among the students that Alco was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Alco simply didn't have the time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was that she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead her to earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Alco herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Hey, Alco, that's rude. I experience chronic headaches, and they're not fun. They make me want to just sleep all day. I'd like to meet the other 6. I too would like to meet the other 6 deadly threats of the school. Today fell under that 10%. Today, her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, washed with the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. That was the setting of 3 of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, his overwear air felt placid, tame even. And though describing him was meek was going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even though his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly unforgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him as more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Alco's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. Is this an Otome game? Oh, hell no! This is not an Otome game. This is Witch on the Holy Night. Who... Meanwhile, he's just speechless, yeah. This is Witch on the Holy Night, a typemoon visual novel. So while it's not Fate, it's Fate adjacent. All of these characters show up at a Fate once in a while. Alco and her sister are, like, I would say are among the top, like, reoccurring characters who either get mentioned or, like, reappear in either the Tsukihime or Fate games. Yes, this is a typemoon game. Yes, yes, yes. Our lead lady is Alco Awazaki, one of the Awazaki sisters. Some of the top mages in the typemoon universe. She felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Alco felt herself raising her natural defenses.
信じられない。私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. Cherry has a type moon. You do need to play the VNs. I can tell you, although you will be like me. So far for this one, Witch on the Holy Night, so far from what I've seen, this is definitely more polished than the Fate Stay Night remake. Oh boy, oh, the typos, the spelling errors, the not using quotations in the right place. Oh god, it's so painful. Nego, please. Not again! I can't do this! It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged at her like a thorn in her side.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶
After casting a nasty glance at the teacher's direction, Alko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurled towards the innocent boy and skewered him. Alko, please! He's already dead on the inside.
待たせたねしずきくん。
Hearing his name, Shojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare, an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Tojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock of how confrontational she appeared. He'd never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed mistakenly that this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anybody in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. While he had thought that he had made the right decision when choosing an honor student to help him out, she was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment he realized his failure. It was at this moment he realized he fucked up. His realization had come far too late. What false move in this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would become a storm that would rock the very foundations of this school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame of the scandal that ensued. Oh no.
いけてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。
No, Mr. Teacher, please, now is not the time.
それじゃあ、僕はこの辺でいいかな。
Fine, run, teacher, run away. Run away, teacher. Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept towards the door.
僕は職員室にいるから、終わったら来るように。いいかい、青崎くん。なんていうか、生徒会長としての度量の広さをこの際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
生徒会長さん Coward indeed. 生徒会長さん大丈夫生徒会長 is going to kill It's gonna kill the poor guy. Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one of the set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was an artless boy and a cross-armed, guarded girl. He's like, I don't understand what he's doing. I think this is how you greet people in the city. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players, agonizing over their first move, though it was only Aoko who was reading so much into the situation. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion from him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Shojiro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし、 それであなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing as if not reproachful, even though he had done nothing to offend her. The boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself.
ああ、静木宗十郎かな。君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response.
さんはいいわ、柄じゃないから。こっちは静木くんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くんづけでいいかって聞いてるの。
Oh yeah, well, dumb ones are Natsu style. He likes his boys dumb or sociopaths. One of the two. Sometimes both.
何？おかしなこと言った？私。
いや、すごく。
The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself.
いや、いいんだ。ごく一般的なんだろう。静木くんで頼む。君は青崎でいいんだよな。
よろしく。
She followed her blunt reply with a swift and turned away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand and had been trusted with her, it was her personal policy to see it through to the end.
悪いけど優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし手早く行くわよ。
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
Alko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Alko did best to act professional and directed her guests to the hallway. Alko, please, he's just a naive little boy. He doesn't know better. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than a cave. That was the meeting room. As it dawned on Alko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once more.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解してる？
ああ、学校の仕組みについては分かった。この建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんて、ちょっと想像できないけど。
そう、よかったわね。
Alko rubbed her forehead. This Sojiro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently, all he'd heard about was school that was a place where a lot of people meet to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge of various fields of study while fostering disciplines and creativity. But never did Alko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts of whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro managed to pass the transfer exam after all. Barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Alko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself in the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time, or at least she tried to keep it that way.
青崎、
He asked, calmly trying to get her attention.
何？
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな。
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが、君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見える。やはり今朝は悪いものでも。
His gaze revealed an earnest concern, as if asking her if she remembered to eat breakfast. It was like another hammer to her head. It was true that Alkui had been glaring at Shojiro the entire time. Glaring red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but at the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわ。もう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね。
She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could this boy be that he could not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃなさそうよね。この
Even she found her own attempt at reassuring herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Alco far too late that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well be Ben from another planet.
いいわ。言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど。
Thank you for the
まるでじゃなくて
subscribe.
ズバリそうなの。
You're amazing. And you should all know that all money that gets spent on the stream goes back into the stream. Woo! I have no idea what I have no idea what we're saving up for right now, but I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out eventually. I should talk to my manager at some point to figure out how should I proceed as VTuberin. Oh well. I'll never know. I'll never know.
あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。いちいち声に出すのも会話にするのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together.
なるほど。どうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが、確かにそっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Sojiro accepted her reasoning without an argument, though he still had no idea what kind of emotion she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Mr. Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about the boy went way beyond naivete. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him some jet-lagged induced confusion.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に
Have
行
a
くから
viral. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what viral is. I'm too hipster for viral. I do things before it's cool, so that way I'll never be viral because I'll do it before it sets off. I'm so hipster, I got rated by Chibidoki before she got popular. She had regained her composure. Shojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks. Trend-setting Oshi.
あと一つ。
That was me when I cosplayed on TikTok. Yeah. Is that a thing that actually happened? Yes, 5 years ago... Catboy made, yeah. 5 years ago, you did that first. I believe you, Nathaniel. It's true. Catboy made he just did it before it took off, and you know. But yeah, 5 years ago, Chibidoki rated me with like 50 people. It was before her 2.0 debut, before she had like the design that she has now for her character. But yeah, legit, tits legit. She was rated by Chibidoki before. Yeah, before Chibi's lobotomy. I still have her followed to this day. I keep checking from time to time to see maybe she'll unfollow me. Maybe she'll realize that I'm not cool and she'll unfollow me. But she's still following me, so... I'm sure she doesn't even realize that she's following me, so it's fine. Alka Aoko waited for Shojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒ってるんだ？怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか？
Oh no. A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated the thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって、
With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Shojiro Shizuki. And while that constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. And Shojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things, the way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms, the way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace, and each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Oh no! It's his first meeting a whammon and he fell in love. Aoko showed him to his homeroom of Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Shojiro was none the wiser to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Shojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor. Down, boy. Our boy is cooked. Chichi. Shojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned.
あと20分経つと1時だ。
嘘でしょ？うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of the school shouldn't take anywhere near this long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。
Aoko glared at Shojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection.
なんだこいつ。ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
Aoko, you're supposed to be the smart one! The guy before her was now nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer, when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクしたなんて言わないでね。
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして1時になるとまずいんだ。
This isn't an Otome game. There's no. This is even less of a dating sim than Fate Stay Night is, I believe. I don't think there are, like, routes per se. I'm not even sure if there's selections in this game. I don't know. We'll find out as we go through the game. Sojiro's gaze wandered off as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have a hard time seeing it, as if there were no windows in this hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて、自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
いや、褒めても何も出ないぞ。
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
She yells at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で
で、
それで一体何の用なの？
Shojiro's face lit up as he finally understood what she was asking him.
そこは秘密にしておきたい。
He said with a perfectly straight face.
慣れ始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポに失神しそうになるわ。
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings in a fake smile.
しずきくん？
She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Shojiro took a step back. And another, and another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging forward. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ最後の質問にしとくわね。あなた、私をからかって楽しい？
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted preventing any evidence to prove that this would do much to ease that forced smile on her face.
わかった。説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと思ったの？バカね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
知ってる。試験の時に許可をもらってる。
へえ。
Alko's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet,
しかし許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
一つって、あなた掛け持ちでバイトしてるの？
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わないか？
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの方だと思うけど。
so many jobs. Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The word part-time job were about the last thing she'd ever expect to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood that he was trying to be considerate. Which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd just be as dense about people's feelings as if he was about everything else.
別に、私もこのまま帰るから。
First, though, she thought it would be best if they both stopped by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro mentioned that the transfer proceedings had already been completed, so all that remained for him was to sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。なんというかとても学校ですね。
そうかそうか。うん、明
It's
日から
like a
頑張り
real
なさい。
school. It is a school. She had no interest in whatever of this pointless wrap-up meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いや、待ってるべきじゃない？
そうか。青崎がいいんならいいんだな。
ん？
There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Alko had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was that kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Akawazaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile.
それじゃあまた。
And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned into the next class over. Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom's windows, whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room, and the soft sound of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized the intention with opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て
He had already one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは。
何ってアルバイトに行くんだけど。
Wrong
その
window
窓は人
strap.
が出入りするところじゃないの。だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら危なすぎる。
危ないのはあんたの頭。
Her insult went right over his head.
あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだったわ。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。ただ、できれば私の前ではやらないでほしいだけよ。それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
はあ、大丈夫なのか？あんなんで。
The image of him disappearing into the school distance popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experiences she just had.
いっか。どうせこれっきりなんだし。
You go to the same school. I think you'll see him again. The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock.
時間、合ってる。
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in a uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason, it affected her far more than she wished. Alko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. Curious slide. She's true, he might be dead before she ever sees him again. While Mr. Yamashiro offered to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as she had hers. She walked as quietly as she could towards the entrance and opened up her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked the rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with a red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Alko instead of a ghost. It was that with that umbrella, she made her way towards the Misaki station. Misaki Private High School took its namesake from the town it was in. The area was once sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to an unprecedented modernization. There were some who found to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of the Misaki city in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of the neighboring Yasugori, the elegance of Misaki Hills...
それも当然よね。どういじくっても、もともとが山中の宿場町だし、山ごと切り崩すって言うんなら別だけど。
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing the way they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with the vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus was built 50 years ago, was located up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was not only a step and remote, it had become an overgrown game trail with the passage of time. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of the country town preferred prefectural schools over private ones. Truth be told, Alko herself was one of them. All she wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she would hope to spend her days tutoring her favorite bands on her way... where she'd spend her day touring her favorite bands on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed when her sister's departure, so she was walking alone in the town with only the red umbrella to keep her company on what should have been her day off.
思い返してみると、私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air.
でもいっか。退屈だけはしないわけだし。
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met at her bottom of her gently sloping road. Same girl, same. Bing bong. Walk now. Walk now. Get across the street. Don't be lazy. Move, bitch. Misaki's train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with a huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Alko and her friends had been impressed with the modern feel, but in time the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at the cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. She looked back and blinked. Just for a moment, she could have sworn she seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. Girl, someone with a red dress. So weird. Must have been her imagination. Sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued to walk home, brushing off the event as if she had never brushing off the event as if it never happened. In time, the chill faded and all that was left were the sounds of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had been on her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that it still lingered.
夏場の方ってもう少しこう
She grumbled under her breath. Things are getting spooky, but I missed the start of the stream, so I'm lost AF. I mean, well, the start of the stream was cats getting killed when she started up a car engine, so...
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs will be drawn to all the sweet fruit. What are you talking about? This isn't a sad game. Nothing sad's happened. What are you talking about? Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. But one last battle remained, dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか?
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだから、もう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか?
His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he swaddled him with an unreasonable task. Ten years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with the multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. Once the rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiro Inuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside the urban jungle. The road extended up the conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiro Inuzuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the mountain town, was no exception to that convention, and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to the mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of the trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between the town and the beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground and development that so enthralled them. Because of the landslides, ? I don't know. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Oko Ozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Mizaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately Mizaki City was pretty much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, that scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that.
ああ、雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her. There sits atop the hill a haunted house. That is how the story much shared around the town used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house have sprung to life as almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers at the top of the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. A particular piece of slander was the one Alco wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Oh, she's the witch? Kind of. Yes. No. I can't 100% say that's true, that the witch is referring to Alco. I mean, she is the main character. I know Alice, I think, is classified as a witch, but that we will wait to be seen. Deep in the wood on top of a hill that no one dared to approach. Like a ruin shrouded from the view and even on the brightest of days. Very Natsu-coded, yes. Stood a relic out of time, a building from the fairy tale. This house was the Kinoji Mansion. Everyone in town knew that the witch's house on the hill. It was an unabashedly haunted house where Alko Ozaki resided for reasons only known to her. Needless to say, it's not really haunted. The Kunoji family was a grand Western-style mansion with a long, storied history stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building was consisted of many 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish, out-of-the-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the price to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here.
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. It was a gray double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secured with a little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Woo! Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Alko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up to the wall to the 2nd floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible to the far end of the hall. She'd never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Kanoji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Alco had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. That is a pog skylight of a staircase, yes indeed. Look at all these windows! Damn, they're rich! Alco's room was at the end of the west... Alco's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason other than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest with her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That was the extent of what she'd brought from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She had also borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ。アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life that she had been living for the last year, and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become. A place of solitude that only she could enter, or so she thought.
うわ、壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ。笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
The noisy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. Well, not exceptionally talented, Alko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing to the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant that it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway. It's a Sanny, guys!
電気のない生活か。想像したくないな。
It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas, and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Alko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over his presence at first, but eventually it came to an agreement of now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen and prepared a teapot and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea and then another. This ASMR is brought to you by Witch Hunt the Holy Night. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip and she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her as she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Alko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not with the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup. But the tea had gone completely cold.
寝てた。
She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could be mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting the opposite of the sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Alco, and her icy eyes were focused on the page in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Alco's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She invoked something out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she was frozen in time. The white of her gently arched neck was so lovely that even Alco found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kanonji, and she was the same age as Alco.
私どれくらい寝てた
1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
Alice answered indifferently, not that it bothered Alco, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She'd been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she slept a little of the night before, so it was no surprise she dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに、せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。言ってみただけよ。
Alco drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Kanonji mansion, this was more than enough to clear her head and wake her up.
こうなると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。おかえり、アリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど、お参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Alco shrugged her shoulders as resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Alco had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Alco gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Alco tried to laugh it off as someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて1日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの
Alice was very much to one point today. It was true that despite outward appearances, Alco was seething with frustration. That aside,
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name. But Alco kept going on before she could even get a word in edgewise. Alco, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。そいつ、教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。それはそれでまだ流せる。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。まあ、 一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
What she was really worried about was having to clean up the mess of, and what had happened. That had to be it. If not, that would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of her, get him out of her, get him out of. No, not again. No. Why? No. We came so far. No. God damn it.
初対面からそうで、それで青崎です教室なんて何も疑問。ま
あ、あなたが人を批評するのは
My game didn't like me trying to.
とにかく
三問異界はいい言葉ね。
Hang on. Okay,
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
三問異界はいい言葉ね。
But from her eyes, it was clear the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they never met and they'd never meet in the first place. Alka gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作、スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Alka seemed nostalgic over the now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Alka sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど。
Alice shot a glance at Alco. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear that Alco had tuned out the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important events of the day seemed to become. She had just ignored Alice. The conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Alco Ozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still laying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
The coldness in her voice made Alco gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore to school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to be upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet that careless mistake was a clear sign of Alco's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure that last year and a half. She had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and one day and the day will come. It was a little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Alco pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
オッケー、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Alco could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish the thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ、下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After the brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book in her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Alco grabbed the remote and turned on the TV since Alice was busy reading. Alco decided to tune to a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late. She would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Alco the was her cute little roommate made just now different than the wah she blurted out in times past.
何？
Alco turned the volume down on a TV, her intense eyes light up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was at times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If she could see that in a moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Alco nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない、本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
For a second, Alco thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Alco, this story had already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempts at a joke. Alco had concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど。
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね。
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね。
Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ世の中いろいろあるから、私たちみたいなのもいれば下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。
Yeah, I have no doubt.
背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Alco loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in a mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant the entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was a system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much or simply liked ordering out. Nights like this were common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Mizaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of the hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
The hungry student council president laid out the stack of takeout menus, like she made a fan of a deck of cards and excitedly scanned through everything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much a glance.
悪いけど、私夕飯済んでるの。
With those words, Alco froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it wouldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract the orders from the top of the hilltop mansion, the Red Cross had declared the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Alco and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in that direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくるのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Alco, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Alco was being, but she was very visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time that she'd called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話？
Alco had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy glaze pierced right through her. Alco had certainly crossed the line by going on and all about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. There was nothing sort of miraculous. Even honesty could be a sin given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Alco anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
She stood up announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up as if she was at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with a book in hand. As she reached the door, she stopped and turned towards Alco.
聞きたい。まあ、なんとなく。
Alco nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was chapter 1 of Witch on the Holy Night. I will be back again tomorrow with this game. Yeah. 7 p.m. hopefully on the dot. This was I feel like we've got something. I feel like something interesting is happening. All right. I'll see you guys all tomorrow night. Thank you so much for joining me. Maybe we will get through a good about the game after all, seeing as we've already gotten through the first chapter. Let's see. Who can we raid? Who should we raid? Let's see who's alive. Who's alive right now? Let's raid. Do. Let's raid Claire. All right, let's go. Claire's playing horror game. This is best time to get in there. All right. Have a good night, everybody. I'll sees you when I sees you. Stay flipping on the flip side. And have a good night. Bye-bye. Where's my buttons? Watcha.